Friends, good morning. I'm sure numbers will continue to filter up, but we've got a lot to cram into 60 minutes, so let me get started if I may. Good morning, my name's David Hope-Jones. I'm the Chief Executive of the Scotland-Malawi Partnership, and welcome to our third in our series of Malawi at COP26 stakeholder planning meetings. Through these meetings, we'll be looking to explore how do we work together to support and amplify Malawi's involvement at COP26, the global climate conference that's taking place in Glasgow now, goodness, in under 10 months' time or so. The reason these meetings are so important is because the Scotland-Malawi Partnership isn't some big corporate entity, but rather we're a network, a coalition of some 1,200 different civic links. And as with everything that we do, we think it's vital that we're led by our members and the needs and priorities of their partners in Malawi. So we'll continue to have these planning meetings every 4 to 6 weeks between now and November. And I encourage everyone through these meetings and by email in between them to help be a part of and help direct our engagement at COP26. The purpose of this morning meetings is fourfold. Firstly, to remind everyone about the strategy that we have agreed as a network and to welcome new stakeholders to this group. Secondly, to give an update on what we've been up to over the last 8 weeks. Third, to have updates from key government officials and civic leaders in this space and agree actions forward-looking for the next 6 weeks or so. Hopefully everyone has had a copy of the agenda in advance, but if not, let me put into the chat box a hyperlink from which you can download it. As I'm speaking, please do use the chat box to introduce yourself in a sentence or two, specifically what your role with COP26 is or interest in that regard. And please do, through the meeting, use the chat box to network directly with other people as you find useful. Anything you put in the chat box for everyone will be saved at the end of the meeting and part of the official record of our discussion and feed into our thinking. So if you don't have time to be able to raise your hand or say your point, do write it for everyone's attention. It will feed into our thinking. Time is short. Any direct private messages you receive in the chat box are reminded to save the chat box at the end of the meeting. Otherwise, that will be lost as we can't save that centrally. Also, from an admin perspective, I need to say that your involvement in the meeting, we take as approval that you're happy for us to record the meeting. It is a public and transparent meeting. We are recording and we will publish on our website a full record of the meeting afterwards. I suppose on a more serious note, I'm keen to recognize that the situation in Malawi this week with regards COVID-19, Malawi, as probably all of us know, was spared in 2020, the worst of COVID. But this last week has clearly proved to be very challenging. 2 days ago, Malawi very sadly lost 2 cabinet ministers to presumably a new strain from South Africa of COVID. So I'm very keen to emphasize that this new and serious and worsening situation in Malawi is at the top of our mind and is our primary focus this week and thereafter. We do have a meeting. I'm happy to announce or publicly announce it later today on Monday, the 25th of January, that will bring together Westminster and Holyrood, using our political leverage to lobby for expedited vaccinations in Malawi as a result of the worrying news this week. Further information to follow about that. But I think it's also important that we do keep this conversation about COP26 going as well, if we can. But we will keep today's meeting to 60 minutes, in part because of developing events in Malawi. Perhaps if I could start with those introductions in sharing our strategy. Those who have been a part of this group for a little while will have seen this strategy and helped feed into it. Let me just see if I can do a screen share, as that might be helpful. Just one moment. Sorry, just one moment. Okay, that screen share is not working at the moment. Jade, could I ask you to put into the chat box a hyperlink to where so for people to be able to download the strategy, and I'll just quickly read out some of the highlights. At its core, what we aim to do through these meetings is to give meaningful voice and visibility to Malawi at COP26, and in so doing to raise awareness of Scotland's links with Malawi and promote our members' work and climate justice in Malawi. This is in part at the behest of the President of Malawi at our AGM in October. He specifically called on the SMP to ignite a movement of climate change activists amongst our peoples to capture the imagination, particularly of Scottish and Malawian youths. He wants the Scotland-Malawi relationship to be held up as a partnership to the world, as an example of two nations approaching climate change with a sense of urgency and in the spirit of collaboration commensurate with the existential threat this truly is. And he's keen to use COP26 in that regard. So that's primarily why we're doing this. We will, in accordance with our principles, be member-led. We'd be focused on Malawi matters, work within our partnership principles, not duplicate what others are doing, and support collaborative efforts. We will work to listen to Malawian voices, to amplify them in innovative and digital ways. We'll look to coordinate what our members and other stakeholders are doing around COP26. We'll look to offer practical support for Malawians visiting Glasgow in November of next year, UK visas, accommodation, things like that. We'll partner with all the key agencies. We'll look to influence the outcomes within our means of COP26, and crucially look to act ourselves as well. It would be a gross act of hypocrisy to talk about COP26 for a year and not ourselves look seriously at what we can do to reduce our and our members' climate impact. The November meeting we had 9 actions for the network. Let me quickly just tell you a little bit about what we've done in those. We were asked to work with the Association of Malawians in Scotland to encourage active diaspora involvement. I've been doing that. I've been working with Joyce, the chair of the association, to begin a program of aiming to collect 26 short videos of young Malawians and Scots talking about the impact of climate change and what they want from COP. My colleague Luisa will give an update on that later in the meeting, but that's going very well. We have a handful of those videos in-house already. To explore having a web page or website to share members, stakeholders' digital content around COP26. So we do have a web page already on our website. That's getting completely revamped. Within a couple of months, we've got a full new website being launched, and there'll be a lot more focus on sharing of digital content on that web page. But we have decided to keep it integral within the SMP's website rather than having a separate microsite. The fourth ask of us was to secure and disseminate a clear list of Malawian priorities for COP26. We are in contact with the Network on Climate Change and the government of Malawi. They haven't yet given us a clear list, and I know there's been some understandable delays in Malawi, but we're told that within the next month or so, that should have happened, the relevant meetings in Lilongwe, and as soon as we have the list, we will disseminate it to members, and that will guide our work. Fifth, to establish a clear understanding of the critical processes and timescales between now and COP, and that's something we're continuing to work on. Sixth, to firm up the agreement to have a Scotland-Malawi focused event during COP26 in the Glasgow City Chambers. I'm pleased to report that's all looking very encouraging. The Glasgow Lord Provost has restated his desire for that to happen. He is one of our co-honorary presidents as a network. So it is on the list of planned events for Glasgow City Council to happen in the city chambers. Now, obviously, there's still much uncertainty as to exactly what form COP26 will happen, whether it really can happen as an entirely in-person event or not. And that will affect, obviously, our ability to be able to host an event. But in principle, the idea of having a Scotland-Malawi focused event with Glasgow Lord Provost, my hope is that we can invite the President of Malawi and the First Minister of Scotland to that as well, and we're working with their respective offices on that. Seventh, to expand our stakeholder database of the people invited to these meetings, and my thanks here to everyone that suggested other people to join. We do have new faces in this meeting, and that database has been expanded. Eighth, to establish a program of monthly meetings. My apologies that we haven't been able to do it monthly. It's 2 months since our last meeting and probably 6 monthly going forwards. And finally, to connect with the Scottish Stop Climate Chaos Scotland and other coalitions to support their work. So good progress against those. Just very quickly, other quick updates in the last 8 weeks. We had a great meeting, those of you who were with us on the 18th of November in the Scottish Parliament, the Malawi cross-party group, looking at Malawi youth voices on climate, looking forwards to COP26. Amazingly, 75% of those who attended that Scottish Parliament meeting were Malawians from Malawi, which is fantastic. On the 14th of December, we met formally with the new British High Commissioner, Dave Beer. My thanks to him and his team in Lilongwe, and delighted to have Christina Connolly speaking later in this meeting. I've written to the Africa Minister, the UK government's Africa Minister, asking for a meeting in the next month or so to discuss COP26, and we're hopeful that will happen. We've had good pieces in the media, in the Nyasa Times and 2 in the Scotsman. We've commissioned a major Scotland-Malawi podcast, which will take place over the next 10 months or so. To a really inspiring young Malawian, a really inspiring young Scot, working together to co-produce and host that podcast, and climate will be one of the key themes on that. We've also begun to lobby all 5 Scottish political parties to ask them to have the President's 3 challenges to Scotland, one of which is specifically on COP26, included in their manifestos in the May Holyrood election. And again, that will hopefully buy us continued cross-party support for the delivery of our strategy. Finally, and I want to highlight this, we've developed plans for a Scotland-Malawi Digital Youth Festival. Again, my colleague Luisa can talk more about this a little later on. It'll aim to engage 200 or 300 young Scots and Malawians digitally for a week in the middle of March. The reason I particularly highlight this is one of the 2 themes of the Youth Festival is climate and COP. And we've got an invitation with a deadline Monday lunchtime for anyone that wants to host a class workshop, a workshop for classes or for teachers in that week in March. It can run as many times as you're able for young people to be engaged on climate issues. So if you or your organisation would be interested in hosting a digital workshop for a class or classes in Scotland and Malawi talking about climate crisis and COP, please do contact Luisa, who will be speaking later in this meeting. Sorry to start the meeting with a rattling off of a great big long list of different things, but hopefully that's useful in setting the scene of what we're aiming to do and give an update from our perspective. I want to turn next to the Scottish Civic Society side to get an update from Ben Wilson, if I may, the chair of the Stop Climate Chaos Scotland's international group. Ben, if you're there, could I hand over to you for 4 minutes or so for an update from SCCS, please?
Sure, thank you very much, David. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So yeah, as David said, so my name is Ben Wilson. I work for WaterAid Scotland, but I also chair the international working group of Stop Climate Chaos Scotland, which is a coalition of organisations, including the Scotland-Malawi Partnership, who campaign on climate change issues here in Scotland. So I'll just quickly rattle through some things to give you a sense of what's happening from a sort of collective civil society organising space ahead of COP26. Firstly, I would just say that although we have SCCS, there is also a new temporary coalition which has been established across the whole of the UK to coordinate activities at the conference or around the conference, and that's called quite simply the COP26 coalition. And so I'm just going to quickly drop a link in the chat to the website of that coalition so that people can check it out and do get involved if you are interested. Now that coalition, I mean, I should just say that any COP conference, it carries with it or has following it a huge movement of global civil society to kind of take part in what you could call the carnival of the COP, everything that's happening around the main event. I mean, the main event itself is huge, 30,000 delegates, let's say, but there will be many more thousand who will come without badges to enter the conference, but to take part in civil society activities around the event. And that will be coordinated by the COP26 coalition. SCCS are working in collaboration with them, but that coalition is across the whole of the UK. So it is that coalition who will organise the big march, which we usually see on, let's say, the middle weekend of COP usually. So for example, in Madrid at COP25, there were 500,000 people marching through the streets of Madrid calling for climate justice. And obviously, we don't know what will happen with COP in terms of COVID restrictions, etc. But one can hope that we might have a big mobilisation still in that middle weekend, and it's they who will coordinate that. SCCS is also working with that coalition to coordinate volunteers to support the civil society actions around it, to coordinate a parallel People's Summit, which happens every year around the COP. There will be a parallel event which will focus on civil society actions for climate justice. That coalition is also supporting the visas of unbadged people to make sure that there will be a process for people with badges to get to the COP to get a visa more easily, but there won't be a similar process for people without badges to access the COP. So that coalition will be campaigning on that, and they will also be organising a hosting accommodation system to make sure that we can offer affordable accommodation to people who are coming. Just quickly, just to say that, again, in relation to this sort of carnival of the COP, there will be so many actions all taking place on the fringes on the outside, and that has been coordinated between SCCS and the COP26 coalition as part of what's called the Climate Fringe. So that's another link I'm just putting in the chat box, which you can check out. And that should be, well, that already is now a one-stop shop for events about COP, which are happening in an online space at the moment. But when the COP actually comes, that should be the place to go to find out about all the variety of activities that are happening on the outside. But I did also just want to comment that obviously we have this carnival on the outside, but then there is the very, very important, the crucial thing, which is that in the middle of all this, we will have negotiations about action on climate change, which are obviously the whole reason for the conference taking place itself. And we can't lose sight of the importance and the primacy of those negotiations themselves. And so Stop Climate Chaos Scotland will be already are working to campaign to identify what we think are the opportunities that the Scottish Government and Scotland in general can offer to try to influence those negotiations themselves. Now, this is obviously quite a complex predicament because although the conference is happening in Scotland, Scottish Government is not the host of the conference. It's the UK Government who will be hosting this conference. But nevertheless, we feel that Scotland and the Scottish Government will have huge, significant soft power around the conference, which we think that they can really use and harness to influence the conference in the right direction. So we've already seen this recently. Scottish Government recently committed to publishing what's called an indicative nationally determined contribution. So that is, every country of the world will bring to COP26 what they will do nationally to combat climate change and to meet the Paris Agreement. Scotland doesn't have to do this because they're not a party, but nevertheless the Scottish Government have taken the decision that they would publish an indicative nationally determined contribution to try to use the Scottish example to push other countries up in terms of their ambition. But it's important to remember that COP and climate change in general is not just about what we call mitigation. It's not just about reducing emissions, and many people often think that it is, but actually a huge part of the Paris Agreement is about how do we help countries in the global south, countries like Malawi, adapt to and recover from the impacts of climate change that they are already experiencing. So therefore we think that Scotland and the Scottish Government has a role to play in really standing shoulder to shoulder with countries in the global south on these really key issues of adaptation and what we call loss and damage, and that's the aspect of how countries can recover from the impacts of climate change that they're already experiencing. So, I mean, I would just say that COP is characterised by two sides, often tedious bickering, let's say, and a huge gulf between the big polluters and the most impacted countries. And we think that the Scottish Government should be and has a great opportunity to really stand shoulder to shoulder with those countries that are most affected by climate change already. And this all relates to Scotland and Malawi so much. We know, everyone on this call, that so often in Scotland, people understand the dynamics between a developed and a developing country, global north, global south, via the lens of Scotland and Malawi. And therefore, we think that this relationship has a really key role to play in terms of what Scotland can offer to standing up for the countries that are already impacted and yet have done little or nothing to cause the crisis that we're facing. That's all from me. Would be delighted if anyone wants to drop me a line anytime during the chat to have a further discussion, but also to note that SNP are members of Stop Climate Chaos Scotland and we're collaborating well with them. Thank you.
Ben, thank you very much as always. That was hugely helpful. Again, we don't have Q&A time in the agenda just to be able to keep us to 60 minutes. But as Ben said, please do send Ben and any of our speakers questions if you like. You can do so as a private message or as an open message, up to you. Now, our next speaker was going to be Julius Ngoma at this point, the head of the Civil Society Network for Climate Change in Malawi. Those of you who were with us in our meeting in November will remember Julius gave some really useful input from the Malawi civic side, helping inform our thinking, and we've kept in contact with Julius since. Now, unfortunately, Julius is traveling today. He said he would try and join the meeting if he could, but I think probably almost all of us on the call have been to Malawi and have tried to battle connectivity while on the move and can empathise with his situation. Julius isn't named as a participant, but there is some small possibility that he is on the call. Julius, if you are on the call, please just jump in and interrupt, but I will work on the assumption you haven't been able to join, and we'll move to our next speaker. If I could ask my colleague Stuart just to keep an eye on that participant list, and if Julius does join, please do interrupt where appropriate, and we will turn to Julius if he is able to join us. But let's move on to the Scottish Government, if I may. Ben talked about the important role that the Scottish Government has for COP26, and really delighted to have with us today Tessa Ferry, who is the head of the International Strategy and Outreach in the Climate Change Division of the Scottish Government. Extra brownie points go to Tessa for coming and joining our meeting while on annual leave, for which I and others will be very grateful for. But Tessa, if you're with us, could I hand over to you, please, Tessa?
Thanks very much, David. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. I've had a little bit of internet problems, I think, because of the snow, which you can maybe see behind me. So thank you very much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here today with you. Just from a kind of Scottish Government perspective, we are really excited that Glasgow was chosen as the host city for COP, and really hopeful that people can come to Glasgow in November and really experience Scotland and the best of a Scottish and a Glaswegian welcome. We've got a number of thematic priorities for COP. So we're obviously working very closely with the UK government on delivering a successful event. But from our own Scottish Government perspective, we are framing our work around two main themes, which I think are quite relevant to the strategy that David has set out at the start of this meeting. And those themes are centred around just transition and around people. And that's because we really recognise that to get to sort of net zero emissions by 2045 in Scotland and 2050 in some other places, we really need to be doing that in a way that's fair and just and that doesn't leave anybody behind. And we also recognise the importance of the voices of people and communities within our climate action as well. The other priority for us that ministers have spoken about is making sure that COP is inclusive and that it really champions the voices of communities and participants and audiences from the global south. So again, I think the work that David's spoken about, the plans that you have for promoting the Scotland-Malawi partnership and voices from communities in Malawi, particularly young voices, I think are something that's really exciting, and really keen to hear more and to potentially have some more conversations about any opportunities to work together on that. We see there as a kind of real opportunity, I think, at COP to really showcase the work that's been happening, that's been Scottish Government supported in Malawi. So part of my remit is to oversee the Climate Justice Fund. And we've obviously had some new projects working really closely with community groups in Malawi. And I've seen some people on the sort of list today who work more directly on that than I do. But also projects that are sort of separate to the Climate Justice Fund. For example, we support the Malawi Climate Leaders Programme. And again, I think that's something that we really see as an opportunity to showcase the voices of kind of young people in Scotland and Malawi at COP. So again, it's a really exciting opportunity. Within Scotland as well, we also see this as an opportunity to engage our communities. So it'd be interesting, I think, to hear plans to maybe engage the Malawian diaspora in Scotland. And there'd be a couple of things I would just point out that you might be interested if you haven't already seen. So recently in December, the Scottish Government published our draft public engagement strategy for consultation. And there's a section in there about how we plan to engage communities and people in Scotland around COP26. So I would encourage groups, the SMP and other groups here, if you have a particular perspective of how we can engage Malawian community groups or people within Scotland, please do respond to that consultation, and I can certainly share a link if that would be helpful. I think the other thing that you might want to be aware of is that we are currently working with the Glasgow Science Centre on a community outreach and engagement programme, centred again around communities in Scotland, but part of that is centred around the theme of climate justice. So I know there's been some workshops already, which is really about hearing from people on the front line of climate change who are the most affected. So again, I can send a link if people want to hear a bit more about that programme, and to look for opportunities for connecting in with your own organisations as well, I think both in Scotland and in Malawi. The other thing that we have announced, which I think Ben also mentioned, is that we will be publishing an indicative nationally determined contribution, just setting out the Scottish Government plans for both climate change mitigation, but also our adaptation resilience plans, and really echo, I think, the importance of what Ben said, that we're thinking about climate change not just in mitigation, but also in building resilience and then adapting to an already changing climate. And the other thing I think I'll just point out, maybe not strictly relevant, but something of interest as well, is that the Scottish Government has recently become co-chair of an organisation called the Under 2 Coalition. And the Under 2 Coalition seeks to promote the work of government at all levels at COP, particularly kind of state governments, regional governments, devolved administrations, and the work that they do to tackle climate change. I'm not sure if there's a Malawian representation on there. I know that there are from some other countries in the region, but again, it's just something I think to point out that we will be working through that forum as well to really promote the work of Scotland and our partners. So I think that's probably been about 4 or 5 minutes, David. So perhaps I'll hand back to you.
Tessa, that's absolutely wonderful. Thanks ever so much. In all seriousness, thanks very much again for joining from leave, and I'm intrigued to know where you are, that you've got better snow than we have in Edinburgh this morning. Again, reminder, any questions for Tessa, you can do so privately or publicly through the chat box. Encourage you to use that interface. We would at this point be turning to the government of Malawi, Evans Njewa, who we're in contact with. He's the lead negotiator for the government of Malawi at COP26 and previous COPs. He sends his apologies today. It does, unfortunately, despite our best efforts, clash with another climate meeting happening in Malawi. But we are, and our partners, MaSP, working closely with him and his team in the government of Malawi, and I think we do have the Malawi High Commission down in London joining us this morning. So the government of Malawi is engaged, but we do recognise that the COVID situation in Malawi this week means it's inappropriate, I think, for us to put too much pressure on our friends in Malawi to be taking part in these Zoom calls. So I appreciate that there are more Mzungus than we would normally have in a stakeholder planning meeting such as this. I'm keen to also note, in thanking Tessa, to say I think it's all right to announce that, to share that there is a new deputy director in the Scottish Government for COP26, Gerard Howe. Many of us will know Gerard for his previous role in DFID and also support within the Scotland-Malawi partnership. He's a great friend and supporter of the network. Gerard wasn't able to join this morning's meeting. He's only 3 days in post, but he did phone me last night, and we had about half an hour on the phone chatting through COP26, and he is, in all seriousness, very keen to have the SMP's input and our members' input into the Scottish Government's planning. So my thanks to both Tessa and Gerard, and Gerard's very keen to be joining us for our next meeting in 6 weeks. Let me turn now to the UK government, if I may. As I said, we had Dave Beer, the British High Commissioner to Malawi, speaking just before Christmas. And he very kindly put us in contact with Christina, Connolly, who's been absolutely fantastic, really helpful in FCDO Malawi, what used to be before the merge, DFID Malawi. So we're really thrilled to have Christina Connolly. The UK government is our primary representative government for COP26, so really important, and delighted now to turn to Christina. If you're with us from the long way, Christina, over to you.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Camera as well. Yeah, hi. So my name is Christina Connolly, and I'm currently working as a climate and environment advisor in FCDO, normally based in London, but I am actually going on maternity leave next week, so I will have to do someone called Catherine who I think is on call today, but she'll be taking over my role as of next week. So David, I'll put you in touch with her separately. Just to say thank you again, David, this morning for inviting FCDO to be part of this meeting. It's great to be here and engage with you. I think this is really the first time we've engaged specifically on climate, but I think it's really great that we've been given the opportunity to give you an update on what FCDO have been doing and planning to do in preparation for COP26. And just to say before I sort of start, I think you'll hear a lot of similarities between our work and what you and some of you all have said this morning, and so I think there's a huge opportunity to work closer together in the lead up to COP26 over the next 10 months or so. And firstly, I'd just like to emphasise that climate action and COP26, despite COVID, will obviously continue to be one of the top priorities for the UK government and for our work in Malawi during 2021. And really keen to use the delay of COP as an opportunity to build even more momentum and deliver even greater ambition on climate action. And I think we've already sort of seen the benefits of having the year delay. And so throughout 2021, all arms of the UK government will really continue to urge all countries to come forward with more ambitious nationally determined contributions and long-term strategies for getting to net zero by mid-century. And the UK has already been mentioned, is sort of committed to meeting that target itself. I'm really pleased with the December Action Summit that took place before Christmas, that so many countries came forward and made commitments on both the emissions reduction side, but also importantly on the adaptation side also, which, as someone has mentioned earlier, is sort of a key priority for the UK government as well. The UK, or some of you may have heard the UK Prime Minister yesterday speaking at the liaison committee about COP26, and I think it's really clear that he is personally very dedicated to the agenda, and with COVID, sees a huge potential and promoting jobs and kickstarting the economy, both in the UK but also overseas through recovery from COVID. And I think that's a really important opportunity that we can take and build this year. You may have also seen it with the One Planet Summit on Monday, where he announced that a major part of the UK international climate finance funding will be set aside for nature and biodiversity protection, and I think that reflects a real shift and a growing recognition of the importance of nature and biodiversity to the climate agenda. I think that's also something that's very relevant for Malawi and that we can build on. More broadly, the UK, as part of our presidency, has 5 COP campaigns. These are adaptation and resilience, nature, energy, transport and finance. And whilst they're all relevant to Malawi, I think as the FCDO in Malawi, we are particularly keen to have a focus on adaptation and resilience, where our core programming and work to date has been. We also have a focus on nature and the energy campaigns. And we do that through our programming, through facilitating a more inclusive COP, and trying to support and make more effective use of its own voice in their initiatives. So the UK has had quite a long and fruitful partnership with Malawi on building resilience, and a current work to help over 1 million people adapt to the effects of climate change through a £90 million flagship building resilience and adaptation to climate change programme, which will run until 2023. And through that programme, we're working very closely with government counterparts to support and implement their national adaptation and resilience strategies, and it includes focus on natural resource management, sustainable livelihoods, and disaster risk management. As was also said by the Scottish Government, similarly, in the run up to 2021, we really want to strengthen our engagement with non-state actors, civil society, youth, and help ensure that all views are represented in the negotiations, and that whole COP process is more inclusive. So similarly to what you've been doing, we've been holding a series of roundtables. We held one in October on realising Malawi's adaptation and resilience priorities for COP, and also planning another one shortly specifically targeted at youth to help youth voices feeding to the Malawi National NDC that is currently under development. And so I think that there are ways that we can link up more closely and maximize the impact of all of our events. And finally, sort of a third strand was really trying to encourage Malawi to step up and use its own voice more effectively in international fora. And I think there's huge potential here, given Malawi's role in the least developed countries group of negotiators and the membership of various platforms that have been launched over the years, but particularly at the UN Climate Summit in 2019. And so we really want to support Malawi better use these platforms to call other high-emitting countries and to call for more support and transfer resources, particularly for adaptation and resilience, to go to LDCs. And so I think it's an exciting year, and we're working with others over the next 11 months to drive more concrete action, both at the Malawi level, but also on the international stage. I look forward to handing over to Catherine to work more closely with you all in the coming months. I think, as I said, I think there's a real opportunity for us to work more closely together and to maximise this opportunity of Malawi climate and Scotland coming together in such a neat way. So thanks again for the opportunity to speak this morning.
Great, Christina, thank you very much indeed. Now, I do appreciate that, because I think with the connection with Lilongwe digitally this morning, many people found it very hard to hear that the very, very useful update that Christina was giving there. I probably got about 70 or 80%, but it did sound a bit like it had been through a sort of auto-tune process. So as I said in the chat box, Christina, it would be absolutely wonderful, without wanting to make you do the same thing twice, if you were able to put in writing sort of the key points for your update, because I know from the chat box a number of people were really interested but couldn't hear some of the crucial details. If you're happy to write a sort of a paragraph or two, and we will put that then into the formal notes for the meeting, and I'll include it in the subject in the copy of an email that I'll send to everyone after this. But thank you very much, Christina and colleagues at FCDO. The next, I'm going to turn to my colleague Luisa to talk a bit more about the youth videos. While I'm doing that, please do, if you've got an update you want to share with the group, do put it in the chat box. If you would like to give a quick spoken update, literally just 30 seconds or so, please put your hand up digitally, and I will turn to 2 or 3 people for quick updates. But Luisa, over to you.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for the chance to speak, David, on what's going to be called the COP26 Voices project that we are launching as of this meeting today. So this will be the first video in Scotland-Malawi Partnership's new project, giving a platform to amplify the voices of 26 young climate leaders, both across Scotland and Malawi. So far, we've been working with our partners, the 2050 climate groups, both in Scotland and Malawi, as per, and we want to build momentum towards COP26 in November in the best way possible. So we want these videos basically to inspire other young people to speak up and be heard on issues relating to them in terms of climate change. And we want to gather clear priorities and asks from our future leaders, many of whom are already working to mitigate and adapt to climate change, both across Scotland and Malawi today. Echoing the words of one of our youth committee members, Giff Thompson, he says, young people are always told that we are the voices and leaders of tomorrow, but what we actually want to do is make change today. So Scotland-Malawi Partnership is hoping to provide this platform to show their voices, and I'll be really excited to premiere one of the first videos in this series during this meeting. So now I invite Hendricks Nkhata from the Malawi and Scotland Partnership, who is the lead for the 2050 group project over in Malawi, to just say a few words on how it's been going so far. If Hendricks is not available just now, perhaps I can pass to Sarah Knight, who is part of the Scotland 2050 group. She is Board of Trustees and Chair of International Engagement of the 2050.
Hello, Luisa. Hello, Luisa.
Hendricks, fantastic. Do go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is Hendricks Nkhata, coordinating Malawi Climate Leaders Project. I just have some quick updates for you to know. Number one is that the climate leaders here in Malawi have developed some work plans of which they are working on, putting much emphasis on the COP26. Further to that, they have also undergone training to understand what COP is all about, so that whatever they'll be doing, they'll be able to know. Jointly with the National Youth Network on Climate Change, will be coming up with a position paper from Malawian side. And this position paper will be derived from the main position paper which Evans Njewa and the team are developing for Malawi. Be informed that all the climate leaders will be fully engaged on issues of climate change and also COP issues. Like what Luisa has already said on amplifying the voice via video clips, we have started that one, and the youth have welcomed that, and be expecting more of such, whereby after the development of the position paper, they'll be coming up with some thematic areas of which they'll be producing the video clips. So we have that one, and we are very ready, making sure that we are not leaving anyone behind. Over to you, Luisa.
Many thanks, Hendricks. I'm very excited for your involvement. Sarah Knight, would you like to say a few words from 2050 Group in Scotland?
Yes, thank you, Luisa. Yes, I'm Board of Trustees of 2050 Climate Group and Chair of International Engagement. And a few years back helped set up the Malawi Climate Leaders Project in collaboration with MaSP. Our project officer was online, but she's had to jump off, so she just wanted me to say a few words on how impactful the relationship has been with Scotland and Malawi through this programme. The main benefits have been through enabling young leaders both in Malawi and in Scotland to have access to each other's networks through our Leaders Network. And this has been through peer-to-peer learning, knowledge sharing, cultural exchanges when we can. So really to help support each other in their chosen climate action, and we'll be continuing to do this over the next few months as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Now I'm incredibly excited to launch the very first video within this series. I do hope that there's time for showing both a Scottish and Malawian voice. But to start off with, I would like to ask Craig and my colleague Craig to show the first video from Edward in Malawi.
My name is Edward Chitombe, one of the climate change young leaders and also youth ambassador for Malawi Supported Partnership. Some of the environmental problems that we face here in Malawi as a nation, it includes deforestation, pollution, floods, and also destruction of biodiversity. Focusing much on deforestation, Malawi as a nation, we have contributed a lot to climate change through deforestation, as the total population of Malawi, about 81%, relies on firewood as a source of energy. That is why we call for the delegates that are going to represent us at COP26 to invest more on clean energy, and at the same time to invest more in waste management, so that some of the waste, some of the resources that are considered to be waste can also be reflecting on the economic impact. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Could we also show Sarah Knight's own video as well to represent Scotland, please, Craig?
My name is Sarah Knight and I'm based in Scotland. I'm a consultant with NERIS LTS and Board of Trustee for the 2050 Climate Group. Through our work in helping young leaders in Scotland and in Malawi, I've seen such an enthusiastic and talented cohort of future leaders eagerly pushing and testing boundaries for climate action. Our generation face our way of life now and in the future, which is besieged by the forces of climate change, the bitter legacy of recent history. So please don't let our wish to help in decision-making on climate action be vitiated by not taking the chance to engage young leaders in negotiations. So while we're working to train up these young people, my call to action for our leaders is to help create a meaningful role at COP for these young leaders, especially those with voices less well represented already.
Thank you so much for watching both of these videos. As I say, this is the launch of both of these. They'll be released on socials later today and moving forwards. Please look out for the hashtag COP26 Voices from now until November. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to David.
Luisa, Hendricks and Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Wonderful to see the first two videos, from an idea in our last meeting to seeing the first two, and there'll be 26 of those videos over the coming weeks and months in the run up to COP26. I can see one digital hand up so far, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name, Mari Dupar from ODI. Mari, over to you if you'd like to give a very short sort of 1 minute or so update from your perspective.
Okay, hello everyone. Thanks so much, David. I'm Mari. I work at ODI, and together with Sarah Knight, actually, we're part of the Knowledge and Policy Hub for the Building Resilience and Adapting to Climate Change, the BRAC Malawi programme. We wanted to let you know that we are collaborating with the UK High Commission in Malawi. The colleague's name is Benson Linji, to put together a youth consultation on Malawi's presence at COP26, and specifically to try and inform the nationally determined contribution, which is going to be pinned down and hopefully submitted by the Malawian government in March. So this obviously ties brilliantly into what you've said, Luisa, and what you've just launched, and everything that Hendricks was talking about. This 4th of February 2-hour Zoom-based consultation we're going to be launching later today, and please check our website resilience.mw, the details for how people can get involved. We'll be asking people to basically fill out a very short Google form outlining their interests and what they would like to contribute to the youth consultation. So hope to see some of you there. Thank you very much. Bye.
Mari, thank you very much indeed. So 4th of February, and we will circulate details of that Zoom consultation. That sounds great. I'm keen to now use 10 minutes of our time really just for an open discussion. There's been a lot of sort of information thrown at you from lots of different quarters, and that's partly our plan with these meetings, just to create space for sharing of information from all the key stakeholders. But hopefully you've got a sense now of what our direction of travel is with Malawi at COP26. Probably 7 main things from my perspective that we're working on as a secretariat over the next 6 weeks. The clear written priorities from Malawi, both civic society and government. The delivery of the Scotland Malawi Youth Festival in March with a strong focus on climate in the run-up to COP. Updating the Malawi at COP26 webpage for any digital content that our members have to share as well. Engaging the political parties in Holyrood for their manifesto commitments, make sure there's strong commitment to those Malawi presidential requests of Scotland. The youth video project, we've just been hearing about, fantastic project from Luisa. The Glasgow Dialogues piece of work that we're working with Stop Climate Chaos Scotland around. I'm sure Ben can talk more about that. And the event, preparations for the event during COP26, Scotland Malawi event during COP26, hopefully with the First Minister and President in the Glasgow City Chambers. Those are the main things that we're working on. But open space now, 10 minutes for any input, ideas, questions, concerns that anyone has. If you know how to, do raise your hand digitally. If you don't, please sort of wave and I will endeavour to turn to you. But just an open time for any comments or input at all on what you think the Scotland-Malawi partnership should be doing in the next 6 weeks to deliver on that strategy.
Hello.
Please go ahead, Vitambiko.
Yeah, so apologies. I think I saw your email a bit late, so I couldn't really pick a slot and then ask for some time. But colleagues, thank you very much for this partnership. And I'm very new to this forum, but I found it quite interesting in the sense that it would really help to positioned Malawi very well in the negotiations, and probably Malawi could also benefit a lot from the same. I haven't had time to look at the wider agenda that you've set in terms of what you expect to get, but I wanted to point out to one thing which is very familiar to my involvement in this process, which is that the representation of developing country parties is actually usually very small, and that affects their negotiations. And I was really wondering whether, as part of that support that you're providing, could go towards that, in the sense of, one, ensuring that you do support some of civil society members to come to the COP. And normally the Malawi government is very generous with the accreditation. So in that case, for example, Malawi government would accredit civil society to come in as government. So in which case, it would greatly beef up the negotiation team from government, and they can cover as many agenda items as possible. But that would also mean their participation to be meaningful, that this group of people that you support have also been part of the preparation process in country. So really, when government of Malawi is coming up with a position, these colleagues that you have supported in one or the other, who have been part of that process of coming up with the position, and then that position can be taken to Glasgow, and then they will go into all those negotiation rooms. So that is one. Secondly, I think the clip my colleague or my fellow Malawian has talked about in terms of the impacts of climate change, I think it is very much important that I think the way Malawi is experiencing climate change is highlighted in these COPs. We're not denying anything around our responsibility towards mitigation, but for us, the first point of contact on how climate change is affecting us is indeed through these adverse impacts. So flooding, droughts, and all that. And I think it is very important that each one of us takes into consideration those critical issues. And at every turn, we really talk about those things, because in the end of the day, it is very important that in one way or the other, we also do get some support in terms of means of implementation. So we don't know, these meetings are very important. We can generate important projects, and important projects will come in when we highlight the things that Malawi is going through because of climate change. So preparing the audience that is going to this meeting in that sense would also be very critical, so that they speak the right language, but more importantly, they also represent the things that are there on the ground. So I wanted to make those two important points in my view, because the agenda for the COP is wide, and the participation of developing countries is really pathetic, in the sense that you'd have 5 people covering the whole agenda. But if, for example, in one way or the other, you can support 10 people or whatever, and then these people are properly trained, that would greatly improve Malawi's participation. And I would end with that, and to just say, thank you very much. I'm willing to be part of this engagement going forward. Yeah, and I'll be coming to the COP, and I'll not be needing the support, because somebody is already supporting me. So in any case, if somebody thought I was speaking about myself, I've already been catered for. But I do think there's quite a lot of potential in Malawi that, if supported through capacity building, they can help in negotiations. Over. Thank you.
Mr. Chinoko, thank you very much. That was an exceptionally useful input, and we're very, very, very grateful for it. The whole point of these meetings is to listen primarily to Malawi. So I'm keen to be clear. We hear you loud and clear. And absolutely, from my perspective, I'm very happy to take that challenge that you've given us. How do we support members of Malawian civic society who have been accredited by the government of Malawi to come to COP, to take an active and meaningful part in COP, and to have the right level of training beforehand? I'm entirely happy for us as a network to set that challenge, that 10 additional people from Malawian civic society that we want to support. I'm very happy to add that list to our objectives and asks of prospective funders as well. So thank you very much, and we will add that to our asks, and we're keen to continue to work closely with you. We have another Malawian hand up, Tioni Kaunga. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing the surname. Tioni, over to you.
Thank you, David, for this opportunity, and also I'm very excited to be part of this meeting. I have been working with SMEs, especially trying to promote eco-inclusive business models in Malawi, and we have been trying also to provide capacity building to financial institutions on how they can advance green finance to SMEs. While we recognize the important role of civil society, we need to look also at how do we create sustainable solutions, these that can work on the ground. And one way of doing that is also working through the SMEs that are there, and try to promote these climate smart enterprises. So we need to look at really have tools or toolkits on how we can build the capacity of these SMEs to be able also to access finance. I think quite a lot of funding out there in relation to climate change or green finance. And then also working with government to develop policy instruments that address the real issues that the SMEs are facing, because that's the only way we can develop sustainable solutions. We can come up with these other interventions, lobby for this and that, who have just very good documents. But one way of trying to advance that is through enterprise development, and more specifically looking at those SMEs that have got social, economic, but most importantly, environmental impacts on the ground. So that was my contribution here.
Tioni, fantastic. Thank you very much. Powerful points around SMEs, climate smart enterprise, and the ability in Malawi for them to be able to access finance, green finance. I think very good points. And if I may, Tioni, it would be good to continue this conversation offline to be able to work out practical ways that we can support that through our respective networks. Trisha has just messaged to say she would like to contribute, but her network is bad. Trisha, you're welcome to try if you like, and we can see if the connection works or not. Just jump in if you'd like to, Trisha. Anyone else, final chance, do put up your digital hand or wave your actual hand, and I will endeavor to turn to you. If anyone would like to come back to either of the points. Fantastic. Alan, over to you. I can see a physical hand wave.
Hi, David. First of all, I'm just delighted to be here and to participate in this COP pre-meeting. And it's good that, we are discussing these issues as Malawi. We know that Malawi is one of the countries that has been better affected by the climate change. And I just wanted to see if there is something that you are also doing to engage those who are in the diaspora to make sure that, they're also participating, because as you know, we've seen how difficult it can be in Malawi for people to have good access to connection like the network that we saw. But those who are in the diaspora here, they can also play a part in, raising awareness and also engaging with our fellow Malawians back home to, advocate on how we can, collectively work together to address this issue. So I just wanted to know what level of engagement are you doing with the diaspora?
Absolutely, great question. And Alan, we've talked about support for Malawians to be able to travel across to Glasgow, and it would be a great missed opportunity if we weren't first looking at those Malawians resident, short-term or long-term, within Glasgow, of which there is a significant number. So the first thing that we're looking to do in that space is engage the members of the Malawian diaspora that are part of the Scotland-Malawi partnership already, and delighted on this call that there is a reasonable number. But crucially, I think as well, working through the relevant associations, and the first priority there is the Association of Malawians in Scotland. So I have a good relationship with Joyce as the head of the association at the moment. And I send regular updates to Joyce, asking her to disseminate through the network all of the updates, making specific asks for suggestions and ideas about how we as a network can better engage the association and the considerable expertise that exists across the Malawian diaspora resident in Scotland. So I suppose in short, we're very, very keen. We see the absolute opportunity. But I suppose what we're looking for is good practical suggestions about how best we do it. I can definitely see opportunities for visiting Malawians to be able to be supported by Malawians resident in Glasgow. Those myriad practical challenges, not just visas, but once you've arrived, that's there. We saw in the last COP that many of the big decisions were made because it was extended after many of the southern contributors had to go home, because, to put it bluntly, tickets had been booked for flights they couldn't afford to be changed, and hotels couldn't be extended. The rich countries were able to stay because of those practical considerations. So I'm keen to emphasize the importance of the warmth of the practical support, and I think that's a really key role for the diaspora. But I want, Alan, if I could turn back to you, either now in the meeting, or we could perhaps correspond directly. Any practical suggestions that you have of what we as a network could do to better harness those fantastic opportunities there in the diaspora community? And Alan, I don't know if you had any suggestions now, or wanted to exchange afterwards.
Yeah, can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah, I think we can exchange afterwards. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Alan, and absolutely full agreement with your points. I'll take one more hand up, and then we will draw to a close because we're at time. And apologies for any mispronounced names. It's David with a digital hand up. David Samekwa.
All right. Thank you. I'm David Samekwa, one of the young leaders and the MaSP in Malawi. I wanted to make some little emphasis, I think, supporting what some of the presenters shared here. I think it's very important to have youth engagement, and I really appreciate that Malawi's got the young leaders who are there. But most importantly, we can see that if we can have more young people involved in climate change issues, I think we can cover a distance. I'm looking at it from an angle where young people are going out in the communities, training and sensitizing fellow community leaders and young people. But also, if we can utilize this human capital, which is the young people, which is in majority in the country, where more than 60% are the young people in Malawi. If we can engage most these young people, I think we can benefit very much as a country, as a nation, and as Africa and the world in whole. So youth engagement, I think it's very, very important, because we're looking at issues of even of unemployment in the country. So if these young people, we young people, can be utilized, can be trained in a number of things, like an example of briquettes making, it can be like some sort of a business, which will also create employment. We're looking at economic empowerment and other issues. So I just feel like organizations, just like what MaSP is doing, I think we can also engage another gear where we can we can take on board more young people who can be trained in climate change issues. These young people should understand how important it is, because climate change is affecting all the sectors, not only in Malawi. We're looking at it from the health perspective, agriculture, and we're looking at how the country, where less than 15% of the population of 18.5 million is connected to electricity. It means daily we're cutting our trees and it's becoming a very big problem. So I just wanted to make that emphasis that having the youth, I think the voice of the youth, even at COP26, I think will be very also important, because we need to voice out what the challenges that we're facing and how climate change is also affecting us and how it's going to affect the next generation if nothing is done now. So as much as we're thinking of having a number of people, maybe from the civil society and all that, to represent, to negotiate at COP26, it's also very important to have a very good number of young people that can also represent and give out their voice at COP26. Thank you.
David, thank you very much. Really, really good points, emphasizing the key role of youth leadership. I think youth videos are a starter for TED, but absolutely keen to emphasize they're not the end. Working with the climate leaders in Malawi is absolutely key. And I would be very keen, if we're supporting Malawian civic representatives to come to Glasgow, that includes young Malawians as well. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's a good chance Malawi will be the head of the LDC group, the least developed countries group. So for both Malawi and Scotland will have disproportionate voice and visibility in COP26. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we use that to really amplify the young Malawian voice that's there? Christina in the chat box has very kindly put a written summary of what she was saying earlier on. So you can see that now if you'd like. We'll also include it in the notes. Very good points coming in from Benjamin Kerry in the chat box, talking about the importance of links between NGOs and businesses and higher education establishments as well. Again, a reminder to save the chat box if you had any useful private messages. While I give a quick final summary, could I ask Alan to put the poll up on the screen? That will jump up on your screen. It's just 2 quick questions, if I may. But essentially what I think we've covered in the last hour or so is some really, really useful updates. My thanks to all of the speakers who have taken the time, particularly those from Malawi. I think there are 10 steers that we've been given to take forwards over the next 6 weeks. Firstly, to get those clear written Malawian priorities from government and civic society in the next 6 weeks. So we've got something clear and on paper that is our mandate to represent at COP26. Secondly, to continue to work closely with governments. I really heard it from Christina and Tessa that they really a lot of synergies with what the UK and Scottish government is doing. So I think a real opportunity there. Thirdly, the excellent point, the challenge from Mr. Chinoku about how do we get more voices actually at COP26, Malawian voices. Let's take that challenge on as a network, that we want to try and find funding and practical support and training for 10 additional Malawian civic society representatives to come to COP26. We've got the Youth Scotland Malawi Youth Festival in March, just to again emphasize that point. If you're interested in hosting a digital workshop for schools in that meeting, please contact Luisa, my colleague Luisa. If you're not sure how to do that, just drop me an email and I'll put you in contact. The Malawi at COP26 webpage, hopefully in the next 6 weeks, we will get that fully refreshed and updated. Key 6-week period for influencing Hollywood manifestos. We'll make sure that Malawi and COP will do everything we can to try and get them into manifestos. The youth voices over the next 6 weeks, we aim to get another sort of 5 or so of those youth videos. The Glasgow Dialogues project with SCCS, planning for that event during COP26 itself, within the Glasgow City Chambers, hopefully with the President and the First Minister. And then finally, the diaspora point. Again, I'm really keen to emphasize that we take this absolutely seriously, that there's a real opportunity there. And my ask would be for practical suggestions of what more we could be doing to better and more meaningfully engage the Malawian diaspora community across Scotland, but particularly in Glasgow that's there. And we could maybe have a special dedicated meeting with the diaspora looking at those opportunities. If there's anything that you feel you haven't had a chance to say in this meeting, please do just send an email to me or any of my colleagues. We are a member-led organisation responding to the priorities of our partners in Malawi. Please tell us what you want us, your network, to be doing. And we are nothing more than a collaborative of 1,200 different civic links. Thank you very much for everyone's time this morning. We aimed to keep it to 60 minutes. I think we're at 68 minutes. So not too bad there. But thank you very much for all of the input, especially from Malawi, and have a wonderful day. There's the poll results there. So thank you very much indeed for everyone for your input. Goodbye.